This episode of the EV Resource Podcast is brought to you by Titan Auto and Tire. Titan has some of the very few independent auto repair shops in Central Virginia that are qualified to work on EVs and hybrids. And from hybrids to Hummers, they fix everything. For more information and to schedule an appointment for your vehicle, go to TitanAutoTire.com. Coming up this week, Chevy ditches the Bolt EV and EUV. GMC shares the Hummer EV Omega Edition. American drivers want 300 miles of range out of their EVs, and many more news stories to share with you. Well, hello, friends, and welcome to episode 151 of the EV Resource Podcast. I'm Zach Hurst, and each week I bring you the latest EV news, information, and interviews with industry experts. And it has been a little while since I've covered the news, and I have missed it so much. Naturally, just because I had to step back for a short time from that doesn't mean that the EV world stopped and waited for me. I've got 15 news stories to cover for you. Some of these are to catch up, and some of them are the absolute latest news that you want to hear. So first up, we'll start talking about the end of the affordable EV, at least for now. And this is a few weeks old, but just in case you missed it, I wanted to make sure it was covered. On GM's most recent Q1 investor call, CEO Mary Barra confirmed that the Bolt EV and EUV production will end by the end of this year. Let's have a listen to what she said.
We have progressed so far that it's now time to plan to end the Chevrolet Bolt EV and EUV production, which will happen at the very end of the year. When Orion EV Assembly reopens in 2024 and reaches full production, employment will nearly triple and will have a company-wide capacity to build 600,000 electric trucks annually.
So this move by the company is not entirely surprising, with many owners and enthusiasts previously predicting the inevitable demise of their favorite EV when GM announced their plans to produce the Equinox and Blazer EVs. However, those vehicles, built on the more profitable Ultium platform, are expected to have starting MSRPs above $30,000 and $44,000 respectively. While the company has mentioned including an electric vehicle with a starting price less than the $30,000 Equinox, they haven't given any details or other information about the possibility. So for now, it looks like buyers are going to have this affordable EV option maybe to the end of the year, but likely that is it. Next, Lordstown Motors expects to end production of the Endurance pickup truck, as they say, quote, in the near future, end quote, as they seem to be running out of cash and are seeking additional capital. The comments come 3 days after the Ohio-based company said it may go bankrupt if a previously announced deal with contract manufacturer Foxconn falls through. There was initially high interest by investors in Lordstown when the company went public in October of 2020, but the market for EV pickup trucks has changed a lot since then. And if you ask me, Lordstown made a lot of mistakes that slowed down their plans, and one big mistake of building a product that was directly competing against the gas-powered F-150 trucks. But now with the F-150 Lightning electric pickup as their main competition, I don't think they have a chance unless they pivot and look at a different market. You cannot compete with Ford in this space without a lot of money and a lot of experience, and Lordstown has neither. Kia is one of many manufacturers left out of the revised EV tax credit that are taking advantage of a provision within the Inflation Reduction Act to still be able to provide their EVs for $7,500 less, the full tax credit. With the revised qualifications for manufacturing and battery supply chain sourcing, Kia and many other foreign-based manufacturers are now having to compete against companies that do build their EVs here in North America, putting them at a massive disadvantage to win over potential EV buyers. But there's a catch, a loophole, if you will, in the law that allows automakers to indeed provide their vehicles for a full $7,500 less, but only if their customers are leasing. Under the IRA, leasing is categorized as commercial business and therefore exempt from regulations that require the vehicle and battery components to be made in North America. Kia expects to increase its EV leasing from below 15% now to as high as 40% in the coming months, according to Eric Watson, VP of Sales for Kia America. He said, quote, "For the next several years, Kia is going to have to lean heavily into leasing to be able to pass along that $7,500 credit to customers. And so that's what we intend to do," end quote. And that timeline is because, also like many other manufacturers, Kia is building an assembly plant here in North America, but that is going to take time. Kia announced that the EV9 SUV, the bigger one, will be built in West Point, Georgia, beginning in 2024, making it their first electric vehicle built in North America. So this loophole really is one of the best ways to take advantage of the tax credit, especially for buyers that wouldn't have $7,500 of tax burden anyway. Now they can have their cake and eat it too, as long as it's a lease. Ford's CEO Jim Farley is worried about price cuts in the EV space, saying they are, quote, a worrying trend, end quote. Farley compared the price war in the EV market to Henry Ford's series of price cuts for the Model T starting in 1913. But the Ford chief said that the company's founder's strategy ultimately put Ford at risk. At a Wall Street Journal forum, Farley said, quote, you do not want to commoditize the product. The resale value for people who bought at higher prices is awful, and they never forget, end quote. While Ford has followed Tesla's price cuts for models such as the Mustang Mach-E with an 8% reduction recently, Farley did add, quote, there's a limit to how far we'll go, end quote. And maybe in an effort to combat the price cut trend, manufacturers are shifting their focus to larger SUVs and trucks, which bring in a much higher profit margin. Jim Farley mentioned in Ford's quarterly financial call that there is room to capture a very high rate of customers who hadn't even considered an EV before with a 3-row larger electric SUV. He said, quote, a lot of new customers bought a Lightning that never owned a pickup truck before, and we intend to do that with a 3-row crossover and with a bunch of EV Pro vehicles, which we think will be huge growth for us, end quote. Such an electric SUV wouldn't be the first with 3 rows, of course. It would need to rival the Kia EV9, the Rivian R1S, Tesla Model X, the Volvo EX90, among others. But if Ford can get out ahead of some of the other market offerings yet to come, as they did with the Lightning, they just might be able to create another hit. What you just heard is the sound of what I believe to be one of the best-selling Porsche EVs in the coming years. Porsche is readying an electric Boxster, but it likely won't go on sale until 2025. However, numerous spy shots and videos have already captured the new EV. The latest sighting, which you just heard, shows the convertible lapping the Nürburgring racetrack in Germany. We need EV convertibles. It is a market that is desperate for electrification, and while there isn't any information about the powertrain for this Boxster, one thing that is for sure is that it will be quick and it will be fun, and we need more of that. So bring it on, Porsche. Hopefully other automakers like Mazda or Fiat will take their MX-5 and the 124 Spider and electrify those, and we'll have an entire market of EV convertibles. Something for everybody.
Hey guys, it's Matt Clausen, your host of the All Automotive Podcast. I've been in the automotive industry for over 30 years. I've owned my own repair shop for the last 15 years. I was going to write a book, but I started this podcast instead. So come join me for my take on vehicle extended service contracts or what to look for when purchasing a used vehicle. Like and subscribe to the All Automotive Podcast. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you're listening now.
Next, do you ever just wish that we could separate the clean energy and sustainable transportation efforts from being political? I know I do, and the reasons to go electric or use renewable energy sources are so much more important than politics, yet that's where we always end up finding conflicts, and Joe Biden is at the epicenter. One group that is concerned about the policies the administration is putting into place is the UAW, the United Auto Workers, that they had backed Biden for his presidential bid before, but they're not doing it this time around, at least not yet. And UAW President Shawn Fain says this is because of concerns they have about electric vehicles. Fain said the union will be, quote, ready to talk politics once we secure a future for this industry and the workers who make it run. Another Donald Trump presidency would be a disaster, but our members need to see an alternative that delivers real results. The federal government is pouring billions into the electric vehicle transition with no strings attached and no commitment to workers. The EV transition is at serious risk of becoming a race to the bottom. We want to see national leadership have our back on this before we make any commitments, end quote. GM, one of Biden's favorites in the automotive space, has been criticized by both Fain and Senator Bernie Sanders for their recent joint venture battery plant that has been paying workers much less than assembly plant employees, even though it benefits from hefty U.S. government tax credits. Fain said that GM and the others that make up the Detroit Three are, quote, making record profits while workers get left behind. We'll stand with whomever stands with our members in that fight, end quote. And GM is definitely focused on profits, which at times produces vehicles like the GMC Hummer EV, for example, that I personally find to be embodying a staggering level of inefficiency and excessiveness, even with its utilization of an electric drivetrain. It's egregious and obnoxious, but it's highly profitable. And the company is finding more ways to drum up hype for the electric monstrosity now with a new special edition version of the truck and SUV called the Omega Edition. The Omega Edition will have a matte blue paint and other visual tweaks to the EV3X versions of the Hummer that it's based on, and it will start at $140,000 for the SUV and $150,000 for the pickup. The Omega will come standard with the 1,000 horsepower powertrain in an extreme off-road package that adds 35-inch tires, skid plates, assist steps, and underbody cameras. I guess there really is truly an EV out there for everybody, even those whose need for attention and pursuit of material possessions contribute to a culture of overconsumption and an excessive focus on personal gratification, compensating for their feelings of inadequacy. I suppose for those who have a desire for an electric vehicle that offends the very nature and purpose of the EV transition, the Hummer EV is the perfect choice, and the Omega Edition is a way to get a step up on the other owners. And moving on to a vehicle that is in extreme contrast to the GMC Leviathan, Aptera has some updates recently on the status of their pre-production progress. In an hour-long update from Aptera co-founders Steve Fambro and Chris Anthony, they outlined many updates on the development of solar panel technology, inverter technology, the user experience, a potential off-road package, and a bunch of news surrounding grants, funding, and the status of tooling overseas with their manufacturing partner, CPC Group. Aptera continues to develop its solar panel tech for the production version of the three-wheeled EV. Its latest panels are more durable, less reflective, have a better surface finish, and are easier to manufacture. Because the Aptera has an option for 3 electric motors powering all 3 wheels, they also will need to have 3 separate inverters, and that can actually increase the cost quite a bit. So the company is testing its own inverter technology, abandoning the standard silicon carbide or SiC inverters that is primarily used by other automakers, and they're going with a lower cost insulated gate bipolar transistor inverter. According to Aptera's co-founders, the benefits of the SiC inverter just aren't necessarily great enough to justify the increase in cost. For the user experience, they are going to include both Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. That is in the works. Aptera said that they would rather dedicate its user experience to battery and charging management and leave the navigation and music to those who have already perfected it. Again, saving costs. While the company has made great progress on funding and grant awards, they say they will need to further delay the production start date until a larger amount of capital is received. The co-founders shared that once that funding is secured, they believe they can have full mass production up and running within 9 months. And it's not that they don't have the money to start production now, but the process for mass production of the Aptera, which they are going to need to do considering they have more than 40,000 pre-orders, that requires a significantly different approach. And they don't want to start production before they are ready to actually start mass production at that scale. Next, Mini is producing its next generation Cooper Electric for production, with plans to offer a choice of 2 battery options. And after doing some math, I've determined that the 2 Mini variants will offer rated efficiency of roughly 4.5 miles per kilowatt hour, significantly more than the roughly 3.2 miles per kilowatt hour offered by the current Mini SE on sale now. The preliminary range estimates that I used to get those numbers aren't official ratings yet, so we may see that efficiency number change a bit. The automaker has revealed its plans to offer the Mini Cooper Electric in 2 power levels. The Cooper E will produce 181 horsepower, while the Cooper SE will have 215 horsepower. The junior model will be powered by a 40.7 kilowatt hour battery, and the SE will have a 54.2 kilowatt hour battery to use. And I don't know if those are gross or net usable numbers. I'm assuming that we will figure that out down the road. Compared to the 32.6 kilowatt hour gross battery size in the current Mini SE, this is a decent step up without putting too much battery in the car. And what I mean by too much is that if they had decided to opt for an even larger battery, the car would become much heavier and likely lose a lot of its personality and characterization of being a lightweight, nimble, almost like a go-kart for the street. I can't wait to see this one in person and get it on the track for some official testing. And back to Ford again, they will have a less expensive version of the Mach-E coming out that uses the less expensive lithium iron phosphate, or LFP, battery chemistry. These models, featuring a 70 kilowatt hour battery capacity, should, according to Ford, offer a better choice for future bidirectional charging, and they've emphasized another advantage. These batteries, LFP chemistries, can be charged every day to 100% without problems. And that's, of course, something that's not recommended for the nickel cobalt manganese chemistry that is used in other versions. Ford revealed in February that LFP models would come first to the Mach-E in this calendar year and then to the F-150 Lightning next year. Traditionally, American vehicle buyers want big, heavy vehicles, and they don't pay much mind to efficiency. This obsession with excess has affected the EV transition, and in addition to the aforementioned horribly inefficient and dysfunctional offerings, this means that automakers have to build bigger and heavier EVs. This results in bigger, heavier battery packs, which in turn result in a much larger price tag. And while that might seem like the worst possible thing for an electric vehicle, American buyers don't exactly choose what's best for them all the time. They choose whatever's easiest and whatever is excessive. This is also true when potential buyers of EVs are asked what range an EV should have in order for them to consider buying it. A recent study by Bloomberg found that American drivers want a range of 300 miles from their EVs at a minimum. That figure, which is increasingly becoming the standard for premium battery-powered vehicles sold in the US, is far higher than the expectations that drivers in Europe or China, the two other biggest EV markets, it's bigger than what they expect. The average range of an EV sold in the US has risen dramatically since the launch of the Tesla Model S a decade ago. In 2013, the average range of an American EV was 128.5 miles. Last year, it was almost at that 300-mile mark, 290.8 miles on average. The most recent figure far outpaces the average range of battery-powered vehicles sold elsewhere in the world, which was 216.9 miles in 2021. And that's the last year that data was available. It would seem that a big part of the reason for the difference in range is the expectations that customers have. Not only do most Americans want their EV to have a range of 300 miles, but another Bloomberg study from last year found that only 10% of people would accept a range under 200 miles. And I guess I'm in that 10%. Since the average commute in the US is only 55 miles a day, it's easy to wonder why the general population feels that they need a big EV with a long-lasting battery that can drive 300 miles on a single charge. However, Americans do spend more time in our cars than people from other countries, combining it to drive more than 4 trillion miles a year, a third more than any other country. Because of that, because our charging infrastructure, public charging infrastructure, is unreliable and has not been built out as much as it needs to be, most of the time, Americans find that when they're thinking about buying an EV, they really worry about access to reliable charging because it's just not there yet. Additionally, the advertised range that the EPA certifies, that's not applicable in the real world. Factors such as using the heat or air conditioning, driving through inclement weather, whether it's rain or snow or otherwise, that can all see the total range. Your efficiency is dramatically affected, therefore your total range is going to be a struggle. But that's the same thing with gas cars. The total range that a gas car can go is going to be affected by all of those factors as well. Not the heat, mind you, but you turn the AC on, guess what? Your vehicle isn't going to be as efficient, therefore you cannot go as far. You get into bad weather, or stop and go traffic, honestly, is one area where gas-powered cars lose efficiency and EVs don't. So there are some issues, sure. And while the Bloomberg article title says that Americans are right to want 300 miles of range, and understanding that apparently I'm in the 10% of people that would accept a range under 200 miles, I think that a statement like that Americans want 300 miles of range and they're right, I think that's too much of a blanket statement, and it focuses way too much on a number that changes quite literally with the wind. I've said this before, but I'm going to hop up on my soapbox again. We need to stop talking about range. We don't talk about range with gas-powered vehicles, so why are we talking about it with EVs? What we should be focused on is talking about mileage and efficiency and improving the infrastructure. We need to get to a point where there is a place to charge as quickly or as slowly as we need whenever we get a low battery that will allow us to plug in reliably without having to worry and then get back on the road in a timely fashion. None of those things are relevant to range. It's entirely relevant to battery size, efficiency, charging speeds, and of course, the infrastructure that is out and about. Those are the things that we need to be talking about. Enough with range. If you can fill up wherever and whenever you need to, range is mostly pointless, kind of. And there are exceptions, naturally. But we need to talk about these things differently. If we have a 100 kilowatt hour battery and we need to drive 300 miles without stopping, then we need to have a vehicle that has a 100 kilowatt hour battery and achieves at least 3 miles per kilowatt hour. It's fairly simple math. So just like we make decisions on buying gas-powered vehicles by their fuel mileage, we need to also shift the conversation about EVs to efficiency and mileage as well. We need to talk about them in the same way that we're talking about their predecessors. So do we need vehicles that get 300 miles of range? Well, most of the time, no. The average commute or daily miles that are driven in this country, I believe, is around 40 miles. And I've seen some figures that are showing 27 and some that say 55. So I'm just going to continue to say 40 miles roughly. So if we're only driving 40 miles a day on average, why do we need a vehicle that gets 300 miles of the range? I blame the thought process around this on the questions that we're asking potential EV buyers. We're asking them about range, so they're going to think about range. We're advertising range on every EV that's out there, so of course that's going to be the main focus. And it shouldn't be. So I blame a lot of the hurdles that are preventing people from adopting EVs, especially when thinking about range. I blame that on the conversation that we're having. And maybe I'm wrong, and I'm too early to shift to, not talking about range anymore. And that's likely because we don't have the reliable infrastructure that we need for public charging. And most EVs don't charge as quickly as people would like. I'll say most, because there are a few that charge really, really, really quick. And certainly we're not going to get anytime soon an EV that can refuel, if you will, as quickly as a gas-powered vehicle. But, and here's my answer to this. Instead of only building big EVs that get 3 miles per kilowatt hour or less, honestly, a lot of the bigger trucks and SUVs don't even get that. What if we used all the battery cells? Let's say we'll take that 100 kilowatt hour battery, okay? That would be in one EV that would average 3 miles per kilowatt hour. And once again, that would add up to a range of 300 miles, assuming that efficiency. But what if we took the cells in that 100 kilowatt hour battery and put them into 4 25 kilowatt hour battery packs in 4 separate vehicles that still will use the 3 miles per kilowatt hour efficiency number? Most people don't drive more than, like I said, 40 miles a day. So now you have a battery pack that can provide, in good conditions, assuming 3 miles per kilowatt hour, 75 miles per day, more than that. And just for the sake of argument, let's say that if somebody did want to travel further, which is unusual, that's well beyond the average commute, let's say that you have a gasoline engine that can provide an answer for those miles. Well, we have this technology already. It's called a plug-in hybrid. I know I was kind of dancing around that one. If we could build 4 plug-in hybrids with a 25 kilowatt hour battery, and yes, a 75-mile all-electric range on a plug-in hybrid is a bit more than the vehicle options that are available right now. But if we had that, and we had 4 of those instead of one big EV, full battery electric vehicle, most people would rarely, if ever, use the gasoline engine because they don't drive enough. So they'd be driving around using electric power most of the time, the normal use of the vehicle. And when it's plugged in regularly, it would still have roughly the same impact on the carbon output, but we'd have 4 times the amount of vehicles. Buyers would still have the peace of mind to be able to refuel whenever and wherever they needed to for longer trips, and the price of the cars would be considerably less because we're not buying all of that battery capacity that we rarely ever use. You see, I truly believe plug-in hybrids are a really great option, additional option, not the only option, but I think they're a really great option for right now, especially in North America. The public charging infrastructure it isn't there for most parts of the country. Tesla excluded from that, obviously, that's a special case. And if people want a car that can go 300 miles without having to worry about access to reliable refueling, then a plug-in hybrid is the best choice for the money, and it's the best use of critical battery supply, which is going to be one of the most limiting factors towards mass EV adoption. Automakers need to nail down their battery supply chain, and a lot of them aren't. Additionally, once people experience driving on only electric power, they'll likely realize that they don't actually need a vehicle that gets 300 miles of range at all. They can get by just fine with something that has a much smaller battery. PHEVs are the gateway drug, or as a friend of mine says, a gateway plug to full battery electric vehicles. However, the other side of it, and nothing is perfect, is especially when humans get involved, and there is a glaring problem with plug-in hybrids if you don't plug them in. Now they operate much less efficiently and are actually much worse than any other option. They catch fire more than battery electric vehicles. They cost significantly more to maintain, for the most part, than battery electric vehicles. They embody the worst of both gas-powered and electric-powered vehicles and vehicle technologies, and if they're never plugged in, are extremely inefficient and pollute more than a comparable vehicle that is powered by gas. So plug-in hybrid vehicles are a great option, but you have to use it as an EV as much as possible to get the benefits. Otherwise, just stick with gas or a full battery electric vehicle. Okay, I'm hopping down from the soapbox. Wow, okay, almost a half hour in. I've got 2 more news stories for you quickly. Have you all ever seen the show Undercover Boss, where the CEO or top executive from a corporation puts on a disguise and then goes to work at their company in a variety of usually entry-level positions? They do this to get a handle on what it's like for their employees and the heartbeat, really, of what's going on at the company. And sometimes being CEO really does come with isolation from the reality of what the company is really like. Well, the CEO-Elect and current VP of Technology at Electrify America, Robert Barossa, recently hopped in a Hyundai Ioniq 5 and drove 2,800 miles across the country using only Electrify America chargers. And I bet you're just starting to think about the experience that he had doing that. He stopped at 28 EA chargers across 13 states and made a video and published it publicly about his experience. Now, it's no secret that Electrify America struggles with reliability and uptime on their chargers. And granted, a lot of the major networks could improve with this. And Barossa had his share of challenging experiences. But there were some good days that were problem-free too. Of The good or bad, I believe that the experiences on the not so good days are the most significant and should have been the most influential for real world experience and knowledge that he can take back to the company to work on improvements. Barossa called the trip enlightening and said, quote, "There are still issues for us and the industry to work through when it comes to charging infrastructure," end quote. And I agree with him. I think most of us would agree with that statement. And I really hope that this is something that helps Electrify America improve the quality of their customer experience and reliability is improved. I'm not going to hold my breath, though, but I'll keep my fingers crossed. Okay, lastly, to end on a high note, Fisker, the reboot EV startup from Heinrich Fisker, has delivered their very first customer production vehicle of the Ocean EV. This is a big milestone, and it is one step closer to mass production for the company. The delivery took place in Denmark, and not only did the first customer get the very first Ocean EV, it was also delivered by CEO Henrik Fisker himself. Very cool, and I wish them all the success. Okay, so that is it for the news this week, but stick around. There's plenty more to discuss, including the question of the week and a very, very special request that I have for all of you right after this.
Do you own a business and want to reach EV owners and people interested in electric vehicles? EV Resource is welcoming businesses nationwide, both big and small, to become advertising partners with us across all platforms. The EV Resource podcast, magazine, YouTube videos, social media, and our webpage. For more information, please email Zach at hello@ev-resource.com.
It's time now for the question of the week. Last time I asked you all what you thought about the Kia EV9 SUV, the larger sibling to the EV6. Overwhelmingly, 100% of the responses were that you all like it, but won't be buying one. Andy Cooper said, quote, "It's not my thing, but keep them coming, Hyundai Motor Group. The Telluride is really popular, and this is a great way to get that crowd into the EV space," end quote. Christopher Lawrence added that he needs to see an F350 Lightning first. Boy, would that be one heck of a truck. Man, I'd like to see that too. So for this week's question of the week, I want to ask you something all unrelated to the content, and that's why I didn't mention anything about it yet like I normally would. The question I have for you all is this. If you could choose one thing to do or change about the current progress that is being made to EV adoption that would speed up the process, what would it be and why? And naturally, it's not going to be a poll this week, so I am entirely dependent on your thoughts in the comment section of the post. As always, the post will be available on the EV Resource Patreon page. You do not have to be a current supporter to contribute and participate, so please make sure you get over there and join in. You can find that at patreon.com/EVResource, and Patreon is spelled Patreon. On then to the EV Resource Hotline segment. This is your chance to be featured on the podcast. All you have to do is call in and leave me your EV question, comment, or discussion topic. And it's super easy to do this. Simply use your smartphone's built-in voice recording software, record your message, and then email that file to me at hello@ev-resource.com. This week, I did have 2 questions via email from Ethan, not in audio form, so I will go ahead and read what he had sent in. He said, "Good morning. My name is Ethan. I recently purchased a 2023 Nissan Leaf SV Plus. I have 2 questions for you. First, I'm looking to get an at-home level 2 charger installed at my house, and what is the best one to purchase? And for the second question, my Leaf has CHAdeMO charging for quick charging. Should I be worried about the CHAdeMO quick charging being phased out, making it where it would be very difficult to quick charge for me? Thank you for all you do, and I love listening to the pod." Well, Ethan, first, thank you so much for reaching out. I absolutely appreciate your position and the questions you have. For home charging, there are a lot of variables that you have to keep in mind. For example, how much battery do you think you'll need to be using every day on a regular basis? And do you have frequent days where you travel further than that? Do you plan on having anything sharing the circuit, or do you have a dedicated electrical circuit already installed? And when I talk about sharing, I mean some of these like smart switches where you can be on the dryer circuit, and when you're charging, it'll be using that, but then it'll actually automatically switch over to the dryer when you need to dry the clothes. And then, of course, when the dryer's done, it'll switch back. Also, do you want the EVSE, which is what the people call the charger, to be Wi-Fi capable or have other features more than just being a fancy switch? And then, of course, what price range are you looking for? Generally speaking, most of the EVSE options out there can easily handle the requirements of a Nissan Leaf. I believe the Nissan Leaf, the newer ones, have a 6.6 kilowatt onboard AC charger. So as long as you choose a 30 amp EVSE or greater, then you'll be maxing out the capability of the car. I have a few suggestions that I have put on the webpage, and you can find them at the ev-resource.com/shop under the EV charging equipment category. Personally, my favorite, and it's also the one that I have installed here at the house, is the Grizzle E, or sometimes called the Grizzly, by United Chargers. But honestly, any EVSE that is from a reputable company should be just fine. And to your second question, as far as CHAdeMO being phased out, there are many existing DC fast charging stations with CHAdeMO plugs all across the country. In fact, it might not be true anymore, but up until very recently, there were more CHAdeMO plugs than there were CCS plugs. So just make sure that if you're planning a trip, you're looking at the existing charging infrastructure and using apps like ChargeWay, which is great because it'll actually show you the stations that are designed specifically only for your car. But then they also have a trip planner and a couple other features that make it really great. Alternatives to that are going to be like a better route planner or PlugShare. So thank you once again, Ethan, for sending those questions in. And if anybody else has an EV question, comment, concern, complaint, feedback, or discussion topic, I want to hear from you. I really do. Once again, the email address is hello@ev-resource.com. Okay, and before I end, I did mention that I had a very special request. And this has been something that is actually very difficult for me to put out there in public, and it's been a long time coming. I'm sure some of you have noticed that I have been experiencing a lot of difficulty recently getting everything done that I need to do, and there just hasn't been enough time, and I feel that it's devaluing the experience for all of you. And first, I want to sincerely apologize. I, with the best intentions, want to have this podcast be published week after week, reliably, with no delay. You know, I've always wanted to publish it on Sunday mornings. Gosh, see, it's been so long, I can't even remember when I had originally planned to schedule that. I know that many of you probably don't mind, or some might not even notice, but this has been weighing very heavily on my mind, and I've been trying to find solutions. So now I've finally reached the point where I accept and I'm willing to ask for help. I need help. I don't want the quality of the content that I provide to be suffering or continue to suffer. So I'm putting this out there. I need help. I need an assistant, somebody that I can delegate specific tasks to that include helping with the podcast, magazine, newsletter, social media, events, etc. Everything that I'm trying to do with EV Resource. But the problem is, and the reason that I haven't hired somebody already is because I don't have the budget for it. I think that it might be reasonable to assume EV Resource is a successful company with many people that work here and a huge budget. The reality is that it is only me, and I have less than $500 a month coming in through various channels, and that basically covers the budget just to keep things running, plus a little bit that I've been using to reinvest into better equipment. So I can't afford to pay somebody to be an assistant. And in order to fix that, the greatest opportunity for more income is through advertising partnerships, particularly with the magazine. I can always fit more ads into the magazine, where, with the podcast, it's a little difficult. I need somebody that can also take a few hours a week to research and contact companies that would be potential advertising partners. Now, this could be the same person that is the assistant helping with the other things, or someone entirely separate from that. It could be a completely separate position. I am absolutely willing to discuss details and compensation for these roles privately, but without having additional income, I won't have anything additional to pay. So the second role perhaps is most critical. So with that in mind, and here's my ask, if you or anyone you know might be interested in helping me take this passion project from the last 4 years to the next level, please let me know. Have them send me an email and start the conversation. And maybe together we can make EV Resource what I know deep down in my heart it really can be. There's so much potential here. And for the last 4 years, I feel like I've really done a good job with building the foundation. But in order to continue and take it to the next level, I absolutely need help. I'm not going to be able to do all of this myself. In fact, I really shouldn't be doing all of everything I am currently doing myself. It's so stressful. But I'm not here to complain. I'm here to genuinely, I'm bearing my soul for you, and I need help. So if you know anybody, or if you're willing to help, definitely please reach out. Additionally, as I mentioned last week, I've got a few separate projects that I'm working on where access to significant capital will be needed, like tens to hundreds of thousands of dollars. And honestly, without grant money, millions of dollars. So if you know somebody who is an angel investor or has experience investing in EV startups or startups in general, really, please have them reach out to me. I absolutely hate asking for money, and I've never really been very good at it. But I realize that I have to do that in order to accomplish the goals that I have to really help make the EV experience better for existing owners and future owners, but then also just to accelerate the adoption of EVs in general across the board. So I want to thank you in advance, and I will absolutely be checking my email, and hopefully maybe this request will not fall on deaf ears and will lead to something that can just help improve all of this for all of us. Before I end the episode, I absolutely want to thank the 11 Patreon supporters that donate a portion of their hard-earned income to support my efforts with EV Resource. It's a little bit of the total, but it certainly makes a big difference for me. And I especially want to thank at the director tier, Rajiv Narayan and Andy Cooper. They get their name read out every week as one of the various benefits that they get for being at that tier. And then also Christopher Lawrence at the executive producer tier. Thank you so much. As a reminder, the May Patreon Zoom water cooler chat is scheduled for this coming Friday, May 19th at 6:30 p.m. Eastern. I look forward to seeing all of you then. And I had put it out there that I wanted to talk about, in terms of a proposed topic, ways to improve the EV charging infrastructure across this country. We can talk about anything, of course, but that's just one thing that I wanted to throw out there and as a potential topic. If you are curious about Patreon, if you're not one of the 11 Patreon supporters, which of the hundreds and hundreds of you that listen to each episode, most of you aren't, you can get all the details about Patreon on the Patreon page I mentioned earlier. It is completely optional. It is definitely very appreciated, but I'm always going to provide the podcast for free. And so that is one way that you all have the ability to help out if you choose. Lastly, I'm always looking for win-win scenarios, and one of the ways of doing my best with that is through affiliate connections and advertising partnerships. These companies and organizations have chosen to support EV Resource. So at the very least, my biggest ask for you would be to show them some love. Please consider spending your money with the companies through the EV Resource page. And I've got a full listing of those organizations and coupon code located at ev-resource.com/deals. I also have a shop section on the webpage where I've gathered a collection of EV-related items that I think would be something that you all would want to explore. I'm also updating this with some new items this coming week, so definitely make sure you check back. So that will be it for this episode. I want to thank you all so much for being with me, and I'll catch you next week.